It was supposed to be an ordinary evening. The way it used to be, when there was no distance, no reticence, no heavy pauses at the table. Dad put on his diamond sweater, pulled out an old cutting board, and began slicing cheese as if the world depended on it. Mom was twirling between the stove and the table, humming something under her breath. I think it was the same tune she used to put on the cassette player for us when we were kids. There was the smell of rosemary, baked potatoes, and pie that was slightly burnt. I got there before Kate. I parked the car at the edge of the driveway, not quite level as usual. As I walked in, I caught my reflection in the glass, and once again I thought, I look like a man who doesn't have clear answers. Or at least a clean jacket. Nate! Mom shouted excitedly. You first. Come on in, sit down. Your favorite kettle is already warming up. I smiled. On automatic. The way you smile when you don't know why you're there. Isn't Kate here yet? I asked, feigning surprise. She's stuck in traffic, but she's on her way, my father answered. He didn't even turn around, just kept slicing the cheese. Every movement was like a surgeon's, except instead of a scalpel, it was a 4.99 IKEA knife. I walked into the living room, sat down on the couch. Everything looked familiar, but it felt different. Like someone had slightly altered the brightness and contrast in reality. Or rearranged objects by half a centimeter, enough to make you feel that something was wrong, but you couldn't figure out what it was. There was an old TV remote on the coffee table, the same one Kate had used to magically turn me off when I was a kid. In the corner was a framed picture of her. University, cap, diploma. Next to it are my elementary school diplomas. The disproportion even in the decor. When Kate arrived, the atmosphere instantly shrank. She walked in as confident as ever. High heels, hair in a ponytail, black coat with lapels. She stood in the doorway for a moment, as if weighing the situation. Then she smiled. Hi. Hi, I mumbled. We hugged for half a second. Protocol. Without a soul. Like someone was watching us and we didn't want to fail the script. Dinner began. Conversations were standard: work, prices, politics, how fast the neighbors' kids are growing up. Mom talked about a TV series she had started watching. Dad rebuked television. Kate was silent, only occasionally nodding and adjusting her fork. I watched her. The way she kept her distance all the time. Like she was still playing the big sister who was 2 levels above, always right, always strong. And me? I was the background. An extra. Someone who wasn't called up on stage. How are you doing, Kate? Dad finally asked. She smiled slightly. Things are steady. Working. We're thinking about going to the States with Ray for the spring. Really? That's awesome. Mom's on board. Well, it's in the plans for now. We'll see. I felt something twitch inside me. Somehow even her plans sounded like success. Mine, if I'd said I was going to visit friends in the country, would have sounded like an attempt to escape unemployment. I took a glass of wine. Put it down. I thought about it. And suddenly said. Kate, did you buy the test at the drugstore by the way or not? Silence. Instantaneous. Absolute. Kate froze. Literally. Like she'd been turned off. Mom dropped her spoon. Dad looked at me as if he saw something unfamiliar in me for the first time in 28 years. Kate stood up. Slowly. Very slowly. At first her eyes were just surprised. Then filled with anger. But she held back. Are you out of your fucking mind? The voice, quiet, steady, but there was something brittle in it. Icy. I shrugged. Like, what's the big deal? Just asking. Since you're being so secretive. I thought maybe you could tell me over dinner. It's none of your business, Nate. Of course it is. Then what is? She gritted her teeth. Nothing. That's exactly what it is. Nothing is yours. You always just sat there waiting to be noticed. I wanted to respond. Something venomous, something familiar. But suddenly I couldn't. My throat was dry. I saw her hands trembling. "I'm leaving," she said. Mom shrieked. "Kate, come on, it's just. Just?" Kate's voice trailed off. He's shit. Forget it. Don't come looking for me." She grabbed her bag and walked out. Loudly. With keys. With a slam of the door. I sat there, unmoving. My father poured himself some wine and looked at me. "You didn't realize, as always, that words can hurt more than fists." Mom wiped her hands with a towel. Her eyes glistened. "Why, Nate?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. When I was little, I thought Kate knew everything. Seriously. She could tie her shoelaces with her eyes closed. Could remember the multiplication table before I learned the alphabet. She always had perfect grades, shiny diplomas, praise from her teachers. And when they'd say, "Kate's the pride of the class," at parent-teacher conferences, I'd stand back and hear, "And that must be her brother." They didn't say it with derision. Just as a fact. I was her shadow. Mom always called us so different. And she'd add. "But you're good, too, Nate. You're kind." It sounded like a consolation. Like second place in a race where the prize is just, no hard feelings. When I was 10 and Kate was 12, I tore up her biology project. Just for fun. I was angry that everyone was admiring her perfect model of a cell out of plasticine and cardboard. She found the scraps on the floor and didn't say a word. Just looked at me with such disappointment that I felt worse than any scolding would have made me feel. The next day she brought a new project. Better than the last one. I got a D in geometry. It was always like that. She was correcting. Picked herself up. She moved on. And I learned to hide my envy and guilt under jokes and sarcasm. When she had her graduation, she stood in a white dress with a gold, Best Valedictorian ribbon, and I took pictures. My parents were proud. I pretended to be amused at how she was wearing her cap wrong, but inside I wanted to disappear. Coming to the present moment, I was sitting in the living room and the atmosphere was like a museum. Dead silence. Mom, trying to glue the shards of the evening together, brought out a cake. No one ate it. Father stared silently out the window. Sometimes he made it look like he was looking out there for answers. I always thought he understood more than he was saying. But maybe he also just didn't know how to deal with this fragile family of ours. "Why did you say that, Nate?" Mom still asked. "I mean, you knew how she'd take it." "I didn't," I lied. "Maybe I did. Or maybe I guessed." The words came out too easily to be an accident. Too precise to be mere impulse. I shot because I wanted to hurt. Somehow, if only in retaliation for years of silence and detachment. She just always keeps it all to herself. She looks down on everyone. Like I'm nothing to her. "Because you're not her brother?" Mom was surprised. I shrugged. "Because I'm tired of feeling like despair." Mom sighed. Dad said quietly. "Sometimes you put yourself there, son. The despair. But this time you went overboard." I stood up. "I'll go." "Why don't you call her tomorrow?" Mom suggested it. "Try to apologize." "We'll see." Although I'm starting to realize inside. It's not going to be that easy. No amount of apologizing will fix a crack when you're the hammer. The next morning, I got a text. From Kate. "You killed it inside of me. I don't know you anymore." It wasn't anger. It was like mourning. Like it wasn't just the connection that died, everything we could still hold on to died. All day I walked around in a fog. I thought back to Christmas a year ago. It was the first time I'd said to her in years, after another fight. "Why don't you just say you don't care about me?" And she looked with the same icy detachment and replied. "I do care. I'm just tired of pretending we're family when you turn everything into a fight." And I left. For the rest of the year. No texts, no calls. Just the occasional update from my parents. And then, after that time, I managed to finish it. A few days later, my mom invited me over for tea. Said she wanted to talk. We sat in the kitchen. Smelled of cinnamon and milk, like when I was a kid. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, "You don't know what she's been through." I thought she'd tell me, but I guess it's too late. What are you talking about? She lost her baby twice. Pregnancy. The first one, 6 weeks. The second was almost 3 months. She didn't want anyone to know. Didn't even tell her husband at first. Said she couldn't handle sympathy. She said, "If I can handle it one day, I'll tell you. If not, let no one ever find out." I didn't say a word. I felt like I'd been doused with cold water. Everything I thought of as closure was armor. My sister wasn't cold. She was broken. And I had stepped on her most painful wound, without even knowing it. "And now I began. "She doesn't want to see you," Mom said quietly. "But it's not forever." "What if it is?" "She's not vindictive. She's just hurt. You'd hear if you asked her the right question for once." I went outside and just stood in the rain. I wanted to do something. But all I could do was stand there. And remember when we used to build a pillow house together as kids. And how she said, "When I have a daughter, I'm going to name her Ellie." "Why Ellie?" "I don't know. It's just pretty." "Then I'll steal that name," I joked. She hit me with a pillow. I didn't know that 20 years later that name would come up again. And become something important again. But then, I just stood there. I couldn't sleep. After that dinner, or, more accurately, after the disaster I'd caused, my head was buzzing. Not like after a fight. It was worse. It was like I'd cracked something inside. Something that was already barely hanging on by a thread. I'd read the message from Kate the night before. Just one line. "You killed it inside me. I don't know you anymore." And you know what the worst part was? I didn't even realize what I'd killed. Her trust. The remnants of our connection. Or the fragile hope she had in her after all this time. The phone vibrated. "Mom. Nate, are you awake?" "Yep." "Hi. Is something wrong?" A pause. A long one. It felt like she didn't know why she was calling herself. "I can't sleep. I'm thinking about you and Kate. You used to be so close. Remember how she protected you from Danny in 3rd grade?" I remembered. Clearly. How she jumped out with a stick at the neighborhood bully. I was 7 at the time, she was 9. She stood in front of me, shaking, but she didn't back down. And now she says she doesn't know me. Mom, do you know why she snapped like that? Well, hell, I didn't mean any harm. I didn't know. You really didn't know? What? She was silent for a long time. I heard a kettle click somewhere or a chair creak. Then, quietly, tiredly. Kate. Kate lost the baby twice. The world froze. I didn't immediately realize what she'd said. What? Pregnancies. The first one was 2 years ago. The second was last fall. Dad and I found out afterward. She didn't tell anyone. Not even her husband right away. Only when there was nowhere else to go. I stared at the dot on the table. Then at my hands. As if they could tell me at what exact moment I'd broken something that was already barely holding together. "And you're telling me that yesterday?" She'd just found out she was pregnant again. And she was afraid to talk about it. Afraid it would happen again. And here you are with your joke. I squeezed the whiskey in my hand so hard the glass almost cracked. Mom, I didn't know. That's exactly right, Nate. You didn't know. Because you never asked. Every word was like a slap in the face. I wanted to say something. Explain myself. To defend myself. But I couldn't. Instead of defense, only awareness. I was never interested in her life. Always preoccupied with my own sense of deprivation. And she just held on. She kept quiet. Trying to be strong, alone. The next day, I went to my parents' house. Not for an apology. For something. I found an old photo album. Kate and I as kids. Christmas tree, sandbox, beach. One of us singing into a toy microphone. Another one shows her spoon-feeding me, I'm 2 years old. On the third, we're sitting in a hospital room, me with a broken arm, her next to me in a chair, holding my palm. Always there for me. How could I not have seen this before? Each picture is like a ghost of something we lost without even realizing it. In the evening, I called my mom. How is she? Silent. Staring out the window. She's barely eating. Is she with Jason? He's on a business trip. She's alone. Can you give her one thing? I pulled a plush toy out of the closet. An elephant. Small, old, but whole. We'd won it together once, from a machine. I said at the time that elephants remember everything. And when Kate was crying over her injury at the dance, I put it in her hands. It was just a gesture then. Now it's a memory. I put it in a box. With a note. I knew nothing. And I hurt someone I didn't understand. If you ever forgive, let this be the beginning. I didn't wait for a reply. I just passed it on to my mom. Like a request to the other side. I didn't hear back for a week. Then a message. A short one. Like a shot to the chest. The elephant remembers. But that doesn't mean I can forget. And that was it. No, hello, no, I'm angry, no, I forgive. Just reality. Cold, clear, impossible. It's been 2 months. I went to the park. For no particular reason. I wanted to get away from myself. And I saw her. Kate. On the bench. With a belly. It was rounded, like a symbol of something new, almost impossible. She was stroking it, saying something to herself. And then she turned around. She saw me. And she turned away. No hysterics. No show. No offense. She just didn't see me. It was like I was no longer in her world. My mom said later. She named the girl Ellie. I froze. Ellie. A name I'd suggested when we were 8. If you had a daughter, I'd name her Ellie. Like in the cartoon. That's silly, Kate said at the time. But she remembered. I exhaled. Not because I was forgiven. But because somewhere deep down, I was still me. Even as a shadow. Or a background. Or a memory. Spring came sooner than I expected. Not calendar-wise, inside. I didn't wake up thinking, this will all go away, but something quieter. Acceptance that it won't pass, but you get up anyway, brush your teeth, make tea. You live. I stood at the bus stop, holding a bag of groceries. The wind was bending the branches. An elderly woman next to me sniffed her nose. It was as if the whole world was adjusting to this fragile state of, not ready yet, but not in the past. Since Kate turned away in the park, we hadn't spoken. Not a single text. Not an, I'm sorry, or a, how are you? Sometimes I'd turn on my voice recorder and jot down phrases I wanted to say. You were right. I was just scared at the time. I wish I'd grown up around you. I'd save it. Then I'd delete it. Sometimes I kept it. It was like clearing out the clutter in my head. Letters you write and don't send. But you still hope someone will read them, without an envelope, without a stamp, just with your heart. In early April, a white envelope arrived. No mark, no stamp. Just lying by the door. Like a note from the past. Inside was a piece of paper. 5 pencil lines, a boy, a girl, a stuffed elephant in between. Signed at the bottom, Ellie. 2024-inch. I held that piece of paper like it was sacred. At first I thought it was Mom. Maybe she found an old drawing. Or maybe Dad was making contact. But the handwriting. I knew that pressure. Those letters. It's Kate. Not one word. No accusation. No forgiveness. But everything. I sat on the floor with this drawing. Just sat there. In front of me, the day we were 10 years old. We were drawing the future. She was a girl with wings. I was a knight in a helmet from a box. We weren't close. But in drawing, it was like we became one person. Now she was letting me go there again. Silently. Through drawing. I cried. Quietly. Not like in the movies. No sobbing. I just surrendered. To the fact that she's alive. She remembers. And I'm still out there somewhere. The next day, I started writing. Not to her, to myself. 15 minutes every morning. No filter. No fiction. About how I dreamed of being like her. How he couldn't stand being her shadow. How he envied even being scolded, because that means, noticed. How I wanted her to say, "I'm proud of you," just once. How ashamed I was that I couldn't be someone she could call a brother without irony. I wrote it all down. Tearing it up. Sometimes saved it. Sometimes reread it. It wasn't therapy. It was salvation. And then, in June, my mom called. Her voice, snapping, like a spring at the end of its tether. She had the baby. How? Is everything okay? It wasn't easy. But she's fine. And yeah, she named her Ellie. Ellie. The word, like a whisper from the other shore. Like a thread between us, tied as children and not broken even now. I sat in the hallway. My back against the wall. Hands in my lap. Silent. Just absorbing the name. I went to the pantry. Where my parents kept their, just-in-case, stuff. I found a box. Old, dusty, smells like time. Inside, kids' cards, a broken Rubik's Cube, a pizza-shaped keychain. And, a bracelet. Kate and I made it when we were 14. With string. Pink and gray. Her knots are straight. Mine were crooked. There was a note on a piece of paper. To remember we're the same thing at different times. I held that bracelet like an anchor. It wasn't expensive. It was real. I put it in a small envelope. No words. Just the bracelet. Took it to her door. Left it there. Pressed the bell, once. And left. Let her choose. A week later, a text message. "Do you want to see Ellie?" I froze. 2 lines. And in them, a chance. I wrote. "Yes. Only if it's okay with you." The answer. Friday. 1700 hours, no words. Just show up. I prepared like an exam. I shaved. Wore that shirt my mom used to say, "You look decent." Went to the toy store. Bought an elephant. A big one. Soft. At the checkout counter, the girl asked. "Who's the gift for?" I hesitated. Then answered. "For those who can't be lost." The house is white. A front garden. Flowers. Quiet inside. Kate opened the door. No makeup. Tired. In her eyes, not tiredness, but experience. Accommodation. We were silent. I held out the elephant. She took it. She stepped aside. I went in. Living room. Cradle. Next to it, a mobile. And her. Ellie. Tiny. Micro-human. I sat next to her. Just watched. And cried again. Kate sat across from me. She loves music. Elton John. Remember when we used to argue about who was cooler, him or Sting? You said Elton's glasses were funny. And you called me tasteless. We smiled. For the first time together. We didn't say anything. Not out of awkwardness, out of importance. There were more words in that silence than in any conversation. I leaned over to Ellie. "You don't know who I am yet. But I'll be there for you. If you let me." Kate brought tea. Sat down. Drank. Just were. "I don't know how to forgive right away," she said. "I don't ask for it right away." Just, be there for me. She nodded. Goodbye. Do you want to stay for dinner? Family dinner again? No explosions this time. With pauses. And dessert. And so, after nearly a year of silence, I'm back. Not just to a house. To the family. I stood at her door. My hands were freezing. The bag with the teddy bear I'd bought that morning was slightly crumpled. He was ridiculous, to be honest. Chubby, round-nosed, gray, almost like the one we'd once rescued from Grandma's basement when we were playing fireman. Embroidered on his belly button, "Hi there." A simple phrase. Like a first step. Like a timid, "May I," after a long silence. I pressed the bell. 1 second. Nothing. I was about to leave. Almost turned around. And then, the door clicked. She was standing there. She was wearing a stretchy sweatshirt, her hair in a bun, an empty bottle of formula in her hand. Tired. A little gray. And still my sister. "Hi," I said. She was silent. Stared at me, as if everything between us was frozen in air. I held out the teddy bear. I didn't know what to bring. I chose what I remembered. Like the other day. Remember? She didn't take it right away. She just looked at it. Then at me. There was no anger or tenderness in her eyes. Just tiredness. And caution. As if her heart were porcelain now. "Do you know what it was?" She finally asked. Her voice was hoarse, like she hadn't spoken aloud in weeks. I nodded. "I do now. Not right away. But I know. That it wasn't the evening or the moment that ruined it. It was the bridge. A connection. That I wasn't joking about the situation, but about a loss I didn't know. And still, it hurt. Because I was blind. Because he was weak. It wasn't just a joke, Nate," she said. "It was a slap. And you gave it to me when I was already on the ground." I clenched my fingers. "I'm not making excuses anymore. I don't want to. I just want to be. If that's okay." A pause. And she steps aside. "Shoot, Ellie's asleep." I came in. We sat in the living room. No movies, no music, no words. I held my teddy bear, not knowing where to put it. She poured tea while I just stared at the walls, at the baby cards, at the drying rack of tiny socks. The house smelled of milk and sleepless nights. "He's gone," she said suddenly. "Who?" "Brian. After the second miscarriage. Said it was all too much. I was alone. That's when you did it." "I'm sorry. I had no right to say anything else. Not, I didn't know, or, I didn't mean to." She sighed. "I'm not keeping you in a cage. I just couldn't get out of mine for a long time. And now. Now. I'm afraid to come out, but you're knocking." We went into the nursery. White crib. Night light. A rustling book. Ellie was asleep with her palm to her face. "She was born at midnight," Kate said. Like she knew I needed a new day. "How are you coping?" "I don't. I just walk. The best I can. Sometimes I panic. Sometimes excited. Sometimes I think I'm gonna break. Then I see her smile and it's like I'm glued back together." I nodded. "You're good at it. Every day I'm afraid of losing again. And I keep going. Because she should have a chance, not at a perfect mom. A real one." I came again. And again. No more bears. No reason. We watched cartoons. We changed diapers. I read books to Ellie. She listened like she really understood. Kate taught me how to make mashed potatoes. I taught her how to make gifts. Sometimes we argued. Sometimes we laughed. Sometimes we just didn't talk. And that was communication, too. One day she said, "You've really changed." I grinned. I was just back to where I always wanted to be. Only I didn't know how before. In September, I found an old tape recorder. The one I used to write down what I wanted to say to her. I put it on the kitchen table. I pressed play. Kate heard a voice. You were the first person whose opinion meant something to me. And the first person I learned to reject, simply because I was afraid that you'd see what I was really like. You did. But you didn't turn away. And then I did. She was crying. Not loudly. She just sat there and cried. And I was there. In the fall, Ellie took her first steps. It was just the three of us. I was holding the camera. Kate called out, "Come on, baby, come on." And she walked. Shakily. First to her mom. Then up against the wall. And then, turning around, toward me. I stood. My eyes blurred. The tears were not of joy. They were of faith. That even those who have fallen can be a point of support. On Thanksgiving, we had family dinner again. No pathos. Dad told the same joke he told in 2007. Mom baked a pie. Kate cooked a turkey. I brought carrot salad that I forgot to salt. Ellie climbed under the table. I followed her. Our eyes met. She smiled. "Ba," she said. "No, I'm not a baba. I'm an uncle," I said. "Ba." We both laughed. After dinner, we went out into the yard. The snow was beginning to fall. Kate was standing next to me. "Thank you for not giving up." I shrugged my shoulders. I had given up. More than once. But you were in this dream, every time. I just decided to wake up. She nodded. Then she said. "If you hadn't come then, I might never have forgiven you. But now I don't want Ellie to live without you. Because there's something of me in you. And her. And that's important." Final scene. We're sitting on the nursery floor. Ally's asleep. Between us is a box of stuff, rattles, her first sock, a doctor's note. Kate says. "Everything I couldn't say, I still remember." I reply. "Everything I messed up, I can still cherish." She puts her head on my shoulder. And just whispers. "Thank you for coming then. Not before. Not later. Just in time. Families don't have to be perfect. They have to stay. Despite the anger. Despite the pain. Despite the never again. Because love isn't a buzzword. It's the silence you share with someone. When everything else is falling apart.